Our first panel of the day couldn't be more timely and more important. And I'm calling on stage now Katie Siemens, who is SIGA's global CEO, and she will be moderating this panel. She will be joined by Michael Robbishaw, Antonio José Silva, Frank Lee, David Butler, and Dancing White. David Butler will be joining us virtually. Thank you, Katie, and all our panelists. Let me tell you, we are addressing the need for the independent assessment of the sports industry and what the implications of its implementation means for all stakeholders. I'm also so glad we are joining us and exploring the SIGA's independent rating and verification system, also known as Sirvs. That's what we are talking about today. Katie, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Philippa. Good morning, everyone. Bon dia. I hope you've grabbed your coffee and you're feeling supercharged, ready for the integrity revolution. This morning, we're going straight to the heart of SIGA's reform agenda, the SIGA Independent Rating and Verification System, otherwise known as Sirvs. And to kick off, because it can explain it faster than I can, we're going to play a 1-minute video on Sirvs that explains all about it.
This is a crucial game.
This is a massive test.
Sports is a celebration that unites the world. But its values are under threat. Increasing cases of corruption, criminal infiltration and abuse are tarnishing its reputation. Winning cannot come at any cost. SIGA is the world's leading organization for sport integrity. Our goal is to provide trust, assurance and credibility in the industry. SIGA's independent rating and verification system, Sirvs, pioneers better governed sports, financial integrity and transparency, sports betting integrity, and youth development. Sports organizations are the custodians of the game. Sirvs is the assurance that they are fit for purpose. Sirvs is the assurance that the reputation of sport and the wider industry are protected. Join our global movement. Be the leaders of change.
On the subject, there's a round of applause for the video. On the subject of being the leaders of change, I'm going to start with you, Michael. You're a founding member of SIGA. You've been one of our key supporters from day one. Can you give an outline of some of the sports properties MasterCard sponsors?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. Yeah, MasterCard's been in sports for a long time. It's been a real core element of what we do for our marketing platform and delivering on the passion for fans, which is a key, right? Passion, that's why a lot of us are here. So we work in football with the UEFA Champions League, Rugby World Cup, and actually overall rugby with both men's and women's has been a huge part of what we've changed these last few years. We've branched into a partnership with Riot Games for esports, which is a very exciting branch that I think things are moving very quickly in. And then in golf and tennis and really some of the other big ones. It's really exciting in a lot of places for us to apply what we're working on here.
Fantastic. I'm going to bring you in, Frank. You're our platinum partner at BSI, but more important, you're the third-party, independent party we awarded the Sirvs contract to. Can you tell me why independent auditing is so important, not just for sport, but for other industries, and why self-assessment just doesn't cut it?
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting, Katie, you'd asked the question. Third-party certification has been going for many, many years. And one of the things it does is it really provides confidence to the market and all stakeholders in those markets. It does that by making sure that, for example, in this system, if we were to rate a football club in Brazil, comparatively, the same rating in the way it's done would be the same as it was a gymnastics club in Bangladesh. That's because of the competence of the auditors. We make sure that they reach the same standards, the methodology we'd use, the sampling processes we'd use, the procedures we'd follow to do that. So that brings that consistency and that confidence to the market that you see in so many other areas. Now, yesterday, I think Murray and Matt both touched on this when they spoke in their sessions. It is about that global consistency, making sure that we do things the right way, and ensuring that you can believe and trust the result that you see. I think all of us know when we do a self-evaluation, there may be a slight element of bias about what we put, normally positively in my case anyway. So I think it is providing that confidence to the market, but really it's underpinned by the scheme that ensures that that rating and that standard is assessed consistently, effectively, and to the same level anywhere it's deployed.
And is it surprising to you, Frank, that sport seems to be one of the last industries, is quite far behind the other industries in this regard?
Yeah, it is a little bit of a surprise, I have to be honest. And when I first met yourself and Emmanuel a few years ago, I was probably surprised by just how far behind you were in the standards development area. But I think the initiatives that you've, as an organisation, SIGA as an organisation has deployed here, has really started to push those boundaries forward. And I think you have an enormous opportunity now to make a real difference in this area. These standards that do cut new ground. The good governance standard really sets the framework for how organisations can put in place these structures that enable consistent high-level performance. And you can have those independently verified so that your stakeholders can have confidence that you're doing the right things consistently. And I think a great opportunity.
High-level performance, and I'm looking at this man here. It's Denzine White. He's the CEO of the International Mixed Martial Arts Federation and a former Olympic champion, or should I say always an Olympian, once you're an Olympian. Denzine, what are the biggest governance challenges an international federation like IMAF faces, and how do you see the organisation of SIGA supporting that effort, as you've also been one of our founding members since inception?
Thanks for the question, Katie, and morning, everybody. Yeah, it's quite challenging. We are a relatively new international federation. We're celebrating our 10th year since IMAF was formed. And in some respects, it's challenging, but in other respects, it's good because we're working from a blank canvas. We're not coming from that traditional background that other sports have that have been around for maybe 100 years, or more. So, we can do some things that perhaps some of the other international federations find difficult because that would require them to make big change from what they've been used to doing. So, I started with the organization about 8 years ago and started to implement that the governance side of things in terms of having elections for the directors, which had never happened before. Because at that point when I joined, the organization was still only 2 years old. So we've had general assemblies every year since I joined. And of course, we've had the directors elected. We've appointed people to various commissions. We have about 15 different commissions. Responsible for different areas, for coaching, for youth development. We have a women's commission, ethics commission, disciplinary commission, anti-doping commission, and so on. And so we've recruited a lot of people to work on a voluntary basis in those commissions, and that's challenging in itself to find the people that want to commit the time, as we find with SIGA as well. We have the various bodies. It's finding the people that want to commit the time to the work. So that's challenging. And then now we've grown quite a lot in the last 5-6 years. We're now 120 federations globally. So I think it's really trying to get the national federations themselves as well to try and follow the lead of the international federation in terms of the democratic process, holding regular meetings that are minuted and making sure that they have internal bodies that regulate certain areas. Obviously with our sport, which is a contact sport, medical is very important. And making sure that the athletes are taken care of. I think we should never lose sight of the reason why we're here. We're here to support the athletes and to grow the sport. So we're not just focusing on the elite end, we're also looking at the grassroots development of the sport as well. We just recently had the World Youth Championships with over 500 athletes participating from 50 countries, which is huge considering we only started that event in 2019. It's doubled since 2019. And so youth development is one of the areas that we're pushing. One of the messages I try and get across to all of our national federations is that the way to grow your federation is through youth development, through membership. And if you can build a membership of 20, 30,000 individuals, then you'll have the resources there to do a lot of the governance work that's required and employ people to do the admin, rather than just totally relying on volunteers. So I think there are those sort of challenges, and we've just recently started putting in place continental structures. You may have seen in the press just this week that we've created the Asian MMA Federation. So we've got about 30 members in Asia, and so we've created a federation for them, put in place an interim board, and then within 12 months that interim board has to call a general assembly and have elected positions, agree statutes, and so there's a lot of work involved. We take the work of governance very seriously. I think we're doing well in that regard. We've just recently become signatories to WADA.
Congratulations on that. That was a brilliant win for you.
Yes, it was, because we'd been working on that for several years. We went through a governance audit as part of that process. So they're not just looking at your compliance to the anti-doping code, but they're also looking at governance as well. So that was quite stringent. It was very much a questionnaire type audit where you were asked questions and then you had to supply the information to back it up. It was quite tough. And then obviously they check that all of the information you've provided is correct and proper.
It's been great watching IMAF go on this governance journey, which I think all sports organisations are on a governance journey. It's ongoing. It's not just you get the certificate or compliance once. And I think the Athletes Commission and all the other commissions you've done is a really innovative way to scale up governance in a cost-effective way. I'd just like to shout out to Michelle Varoken, who's watching online, because she messaged me last night on LinkedIn. I know she's on your commission. I'm going to bring in David from European Rugby League. He's online. He couldn't be with us in person. David's the general manager, and the European Rugby League Federation was the first ever sports organisation to go through Sirvs. They were our pioneers, stroke guinea pigs. And I would like to ask you, David. Hi, David. We can see you, and thanks for the wave. Why did European Rugby League go through Sirvs, and how did you find the process?
Thanks, Katie, and sorry I can't be with you in person. We just completed our European Youth Championships earlier this week, so unfortunately getting around to Europe is ever more challenging, and I can't be there today. But in terms of why we decided to go through Sirvs, we were at a juncture where we felt that we needed to review our governance. So our organisation is around 20 years old, and there'd never really been a formal governance review that had taken place during that time. So really to sort of echo some of the comments that have already been made, we had some ideas of areas that we felt needed to change, that needed to improve. But having an independent framework to work to helped us to understand how we could perhaps move from being good to great, and also to have that assurance for our members and for our partners that somebody else has had a look and identified areas that we need to improve on. Obviously, marking your own homework only gets you to a certain level on that spectrum of good to great. So that was the main drive. And in terms of the process, it was really just short of a year's work, really. We agreed and signed up in late 2020, and then throughout 2021 undertook a series of audits with BSI and revisited some areas, and obviously within the space of those audits there were corrective action plans which we took away, implemented some of those changes or started the journey for some of those changes, and rightly so. Some of the things that we felt collectively that we needed to improve on weren't overnight fixes. So some of those things have needed time to embed and to percolate through the organisation. But yeah, as you said, we were the first to complete that in around October last year, and obviously very proud of the silver award that we got. And just to put that into context, whilst silver is seen as second best in some rankings, that was an overall percentage grade of 97.79% as it rolls off the tongue, and that is high bar. So gold organisations are obviously even higher than that. So we were very proud to get that rating. We've not sat on our laurels. We've been continually working through the collective action plan, and we're now in a position that we can demonstrate some of those longer term changes starting to take effect, and obviously we'll look forward to revisiting that grade in the future and hopefully moving up onto the top step of the podium.
Oh, we look forward to working with you for the next step and to achieving the gold. Antonio, your European Swimming Federation, you're the newly elected president. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Len was already been a member of SIGA for a long time before you joined. Why did you decide to initiate Sirvs? Pretty soon after you were elected, it was one of the first things you did.
Thank you. Good morning, Katie. Good morning. And thank you, Emmanuel, for inviting me to be here. Quite a journey, challenging journey, just the previous speakers told, because it was a commitment. Apart from the fact that Len is already member of SIGA since long, they never took a real process in order to get more transparency, good governance, integrity policies. And one of the main drivers during my campaign was to perform and to undergo an independent audit on these two main issues, integrity and good governance. In the first day that I get the presidency, 5th of February 2022, in my 100-day action plan, we decide to perform this independent audit. We did it with SIGA, so it was recently, for me, acknowledgement of this corporation. And in Cascais, 12th of May, we present the first phase of the audit process, the SIGA independent rating and verification system. And it's a lot to do, but we just started, which is good.
And what was the reaction from your members? Because it was quite a different approach to actually say, this is where we are in terms of governance. What was the reaction from them in terms of this new innovative way to present governance to them?
We knew since the beginning that the current status, the state of the art was not good, so we don't even get the rank to achieve the bronze. So that's where we are now in land. So we are doing a lot now. We have already made a lot of changes in land. We have set up the independent, full independent functioning integrity unit. It's performed by Quest Industries, so it's working with a lot of international federations. Also, we have a hotline for whistleblowing in all matters that related with integrity, doping, corruption, competition manipulation, and so on. So we are doing our process, and after 22nd of October, we will perform the second stage of the audit process with Sirvs.
Frank, can you just outline, because it is a two-stage process, Sirvs, so we want to explain to the sports organisations who haven't decided to go through it yet what that is. It's not just here's the audit and here's the result, is it?
No, it's not. And the two-stage process is a very traditional and well-established way of assessing organisations and their capability and their organisational capability. The first stage generally is a desktop review where we will go through the requirements of a standard within an organisation to ensure that they have the systems, processes, and competencies in place, that if they follow those processes that they have and they've established them, that those processes and systems they have in place will meet the requirements of the standard. Then really it's a second stage process that we'll go back and we'll do some more in-depth auditing. So we'll assess those processes and systems to ensure that that's what they actually do on a day-to-day basis. So if you like, that the culture required, the deployment of those processes has been sufficiently embedded within that organization that we can see evidence that every day that people go to work, turn up there, whatever, that they follow those processes and we see the records of those. So really, it's a two-stage process. Do you have that capability within the organization in theory? And then, do you actually put that theory into practice? Which I think is probably a familiar concept for many people in this room, actually, in the sporting organizations.
We mentioned about measuring the culture of compliance. Tell us, from a MasterCard perspective, how important the culture is. Obviously, diversity and inclusion is at the core of your values. How do you, as a sponsor, move from the values of MasterCard for when you're deciding to sponsor a sports property?
Sure. I think, first of all, you said so many of the key words right there. And for those that have, if you are in a brand or in a corporation, maybe they're not daily things we talk about, but they're daily things we live with. Culture, competency was a big one. Do you have people that can even do this? Do you have people that understand? Is it part of their job? I mean, literally, is it in their job description to wake up and make sure you've got systems in place? You're doing things the right way, because you have. If you think of an old business, right, it's out selling something, it's out preparing something, making something, but to have these back office or these frontline things sometimes to measure it. But for us, none of these things happen by accident. And I think that's what I've personally learned over the last number of years, is that anytime you're trying to make a change, it's not going to happen just because it seems like a good idea. You have to sit down, diversity inclusion in your hiring. You may say you want to do it, but well, how are you doing it? How are you recruiting? Who are you talking to? Are you at the university level versus, just sifting through resumes differently? So any of these changes are going to take some time. I applaud rugby. I'm not surprised, for those that deal with rugby, that they would be a leader in this, given the culture of the game and what they do, just how they manage things. But it takes time. Listen to Denson here. None of that stuff happened by accident. To sit down and be a purposeful journey that you want to go down, and it defines who you are. And for us, from a cultural point of view, and how we all started here with SIGA years ago, was with the UN and the Partnership Against Corruption Initiative. Patchy just deciding that we were going to be a company, we were going to be a brand that wanted to stand for integrity. That if you looked at MasterCard around the world in all the ways, we touch trillions of dollars of transactions, the trust that's needed to know that we're doing that in a competent way, in a legal way, in a thoughtful way, in an ethical way, right? Laws don't necessarily always keep up with what's right. And so making sure that when we make these decisions, and the next area for us is data privacy. This isn't a MasterCard pitch, but when you think of the privacy that we're all trying to live within, of whether it's the business and the information we share with the business or us personally, but how do you define those lines of what's private versus what needs to be shared? So that's why I think having rules and processes and disclosures that say, okay, these are things we are required, and these are things that are important to share. So from a brand, I don't want to say it's 101 because it takes time, but it's certainly 101 that we have to focus on it. And just the Sirvs coming into place is something that's very important for us. It's a little easy for me to say because we don't have to do a lot for it, but I can tell you, as we look at it from a sports point of view, we certainly will be at a time where we're going to look back and say, how did we ever make decisions without this? How did we not have this sort of information at our disposal? And I just say that, not that you've gone there, sir, but I would say for us on the brand side, anybody out there listening, the change that we're going to have to go through is the expectation of what it is. So right now, no one's asking for it. So I know any other brands that I've talked to, they're like, well, I don't really know what our role would be since I don't kind of have to do it. That's because boards of directors don't know about it yet. CFOs don't know about it. General counsels don't know about it. But I think once they do, and once they understand that there's another level of information that they can take in as they're making decisions, because these are huge dollars at stake. And I guess that's the biggest change that's happened, is certainly, and we're all somewhat similar age in our lifetime here, is how much the money has changed. And once you put money into any situation, that changes things dramatically. So for us as a brand, how we're spending our money and the thoughtfulness of what we do with it and what that represents for our stockholders and consumers. So we look at this with obviously open arms and welcome it as, again, another way for us to evaluate the best decisions we can make as a business, basically spending other people's money.
So you could basically look at the Sirvs rating and almost factor that in as a metric when you're deciding sponsorship to mitigate some reputational risk.
It really does. I mean, we deal with reputational risk all the time, whether it's an event-based situation that happens sometimes, or leadership, or unfortunately the bad stories you hear. Look, I think for most part, it's not necessarily that many people trying to do bad things. It's good people just not necessarily knowing all the things that need to be done. And I would say, at least again, in the experience I've had at MasterCard and things we've gone through, whether it's asset management, reporting, just different things we have to do to be held accountable. It's not that we were trying to do anything wrong. It's just if someone said, well, how many tickets do we have? How do we transfer them? Who gets access to them? How many customers get to use them? But when you have the government asking really good questions, well, how many times are you hosting that person? And there's rules in place, right? There are just rules all around the world. And so if we have rules in place that says we can only host a customer 4 times in any one 12-month period, well, how do we actually do that? Well, we have to keep track of it. We have to have a system. It has to be something verifiable and audited, so that if someone comes back and says, well, hold on a second, maybe this bank or this government, right? Once you cross again into government, it changes the rules. So yeah, any way that we can get that information that says, okay, who are we dealing with? How do they work? How do they share information? And how is it we're partnering in this, again, in this journey, is only going to help us be better. And I really think, again, to pitch sort of the sports out there looking, I really think this is something really smart to do. It shouldn't be that onerous and that's such a big decision to do. Is, yeah, there's going to be some warts that are going to be uncovered, but if you're doing the right thing, you're going to be able to fix them. You're going to have help fixing them. So I do think any brand would welcome that, and I do think we're going to hit that point. We're not there yet, clearly. We're just getting started. But there's become a point where if you don't have it now, it's just obvious, well, hold on, you're not even trying. That's going to be a bad sign. Right now, it's you don't know about it, and you're still trying to figure it out, and who's going to go first. I get that, but we're now getting a little past that. But we are going to get to the point where it's just going to be another one of those things that you're going to eventually brag about because you're going to come in and pitch on it, I'm sure.
You'll be wearing
sure.
that gold badge
Exactly.
with a badge of honor.
Exactly.
Denzel, IMF has already made the board decision this year to go through Sirvs. We start shortly, later this year. What is your message to other sports federations that may be reluctant or have reservations? Michael's already sort of given some indication that he says at some stage you should have it or not. How can we inspire them to follow suit and lead the way for sport integrity worldwide?
Well, I think a lot of international federations need to address a lot of issues which have been very public recently. And clearly there are problems there in terms of good governance. And I think if there isn't some kind of system like the SIGA independent rating verification system, the credibility of a lot of international federations is going to continue to go down. At the moment, they're doing some, those sports that are within the Olympic family, they're doing periodically some kind of self-assessment. But as we heard from Frank, it's not probably the best. They're more or less marking their own homework. And unless it's independent, it doesn't really have the same level of credibility. And the level of scrutiny and that deep dive into what the federations are doing is actually not there. So they're just ticking boxes doesn't work. I think, it's good having the theory, but you actually have to put things into practice. And people, they need to have people that are motivated to drive that agenda forward. Otherwise, it doesn't happen, as has been said by other people on the panel. So I think that's really important. And, ultimately, they won't attract sponsors like MasterCard and others, because a lot of the corporates are very concerned about their own brand reputation, image is important, and perception of their brands. So they only want to be associated with organizations that are going to show them in a positive light. So any kind of controversy, and we've seen lots of issues around child welfare, for example, in some sports. You know, we ourselves have had issues recently with athletes refusing to compete against other athletes for political reasons, and so there are ethical issues around that have to be dealt with. And obviously there's the anti-doping side of things. You know, the compliance to WADA is really complicated. It's very difficult and it's extremely expensive. But the cost of not doing it is even higher to the, you know, the tarnished image of the sport. If you have that reputation that everyone is cheating, everyone's doping, it's not a good look. And even the bigger sports with lots of resources have suffered from that kind of reputation that everybody's cutting corners.
Thanks, Denzine. I'm going to bring David back in. David, what are the lessons learned from Sirvs to evolve your governance? What policies have you been able to put in place since we went through the Sirvs rating, so that, because you've got to actually prove that not only do you have the policy, but that it is embedded and everybody knows about it and it is part of your culture?
Yeah, great question, Katie. I think a lot of the changes for us came around the board and the board composition. So one of the areas that was identified was that perhaps our board and the broad skill set needed on a board wasn't quite right. So one of the things that we've done is increased member representation on the board, and we've also increased the number of independent directors as well. And then on that theme, one of the things that Sirvs looks for is independence at the very top of the organisation. So we have enshrined in our articles that the chairperson of the organisation is drawn from our independent members. And again, a theme around the directorships. One of our terms were previously 2-year terms, but a director could serve an unlimited number of terms. And we've amended that now to being that a director has a term of 3 years. So we identified that gives them enough time to get their feet under the table and make a difference before necessarily having to move on. But we've capped the number of terms that a director can serve to 3. So as a result of those changes, put a rotation policy in to ensure that we don't have a huge loss of knowledge in 1 year and a new board the next. So that was one major area. Another, again, related to the board, was around board diversity. So I think through the Sirvs process, we could demonstrate that we have a diverse board. Couldn't do was demonstrate that was by design. It was more by chance. So we've implemented a board diversity policy. We have a working group which is being established to then bring that policy to life. And what I mean by that is we because our organisation is a members organisation, and we draw elected members through onto our board. If we don't do the work to encourage and improve diversity within our membership, we'll never get a more diverse set of nominations when it comes around to member-elected directors. So it's something that, whilst those changes are very relevant to the confederation itself, it has to then percolate through the actual national federations that are members as well. So those are probably 2 big things. And then I think some of the other areas then were just around the way that some of our policies were brought to life. So we had the policies, but perhaps we couldn't demonstrate how they were being brought to life or involved in decision making on a day-to-day or a month-to-month board meeting basis. So some work around that and member stakeholder comms has been the main thrust of the last 12 months, really, to improve, to improve and embed those changes.
Fantastic. And it does show that it is possible. It takes time, but if you've got a willingness to commit, that it is possible in order to achieve that. On the subject of diversity and inclusion, today's Wednesday, which is a wow day, Women on Wednesdays. How hard is it, in practical terms, to put gender equity in the board of an international federation or a European federation? Because you can't just click your fingers and do it. You can have targets and quotas. But as male leaders, how hard is it to make the change? Denzine.
Yeah, it's one of the challenges, especially in a sport like MMA, which is very male dominated. But when I started with IMAF, our sponsor, UFC, one of their first comments to me was that our board is it's very Eurocentric, and so we kind of set about changing the diversity within the board by changing the statutes. So now the statutes say that there has to be representation from all 5 continents. So we have an Asian representative on the board, someone for Oceania, someone for Africa, someone for Pan America and Europe. And then the next stage was to try and get more gender balance in the board. So what we've done there is to change the statutes, and I think for me that's the only way to kind of force the issue. It's probably not the right choice of words, but what we've done is change our statutes so that at least 30% of our board has to be female. So female candidates have to be voted onto the board going forward. So currently we're doing quite well. I think we have 3 females on the board now out of a board of 13, 14 people. Obviously we want to see that increase, and it'd be good to see one day a board of 50-50, men and women. I think the other way of doing it, if you don't want to use the statutes, because changing statutes can be quite difficult because you need quite a high threshold of votes from the General Assembly to change your statutes. Sometimes up to 75% of your members have to agree to it. So one of the other ways that you can do it, and I've seen this in the UK, where the governing bodies were told that they had to have 25 then 30% females on their board, and one of the ways they did that, obviously they could twist arms because they were the funding bodies. So if governing bodies didn't do that, potentially they could lose money. But the good thing that they did as well was they encouraged sports to bring on non-exec directors that are not elected directly by the membership. So these non-execs can be appointed by the board members themselves, and they're there at the discretion of the board members. So that's also one of the other things that we've done. We have non-exec directors. So we have a female non-exec director from the UFC, from our sponsor, for example, and we have another non-exec female member and one elected female member.
So it does show that with commitment, you can make those changes.
Yeah, and I think the other thing we did as well was we created the Women's Commission.
Yeah.
And then what that has done is it's encouraged our national federations to follow that example, and so they've started creating female commissions within their own countries as well, and that is continuing to grow. I think we've got female commissions in maybe 10 of our national federations so far. So we're at the beginning of that process, and I think that's working really well, because what we also want is to see the number of female participation as well. We want that to be on the same level
expanding
as the men's
demographic.
That's part of the growth
Yeah.
of the sport. We want to grow the sport, and that's a huge area for growth.
Do you want to comment on diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously weird with a bunch of men up here. I'm a little bit of a fill-in for a time zone. This chair was supposed to be filled by my close colleague, Ali, who I do a ton of this stuff with, and we've had an amazing a few years working on it together, and I wish she was here for you to hear from her. But what she and I talk about all the time is, it's a very deliberate action. I mean, it's everything Denzine's saying, and it's each little decision. So my sort of message is to any of the women out there is just, I don't want to say it's as easy as raising your hand, but you need to raise. I said if you do raise your hand, I think eventually it's not that hard a door to walk through. People are looking for women that are interested. Independence is a key thing. This whole notion of getting voted in from the whole male population thing, obviously that's what's being broken, which is great. But the world is looking for women that at first really just have the interest. Clearly, if you're in this space and you're even here listening, you're probably someone who leans forward. You're probably someone who's not afraid to try something new and to raise your hand. And I would encourage you to, whatever your space is in, just look for those opportunities. I know people that have never played a certain sport or never been involved in a certain activity, but they bring an element of knowledge, experience, something they've done in their job that makes them a viable candidate to actually bring a point of view and bring something to the table, as it were, and in particularly places that really are trying to grow. And I can't imagine there's many sports right out that aren't looking for more female participation. We work a lot in the golf space. That's a huge growth area for golf. So we work with Annika Sorenstam, who's sort of the frontline champion, is the greatest player ever, but there's so many levels all down through golf around the world that are looking for females to not just play. Of course, that's an ultimate goal because you understand it, you're involved in the culture, but to run tournaments, to run golf courses, to be superintendents, to do all those other things. We've done some work with the Grammys and the Recording Academy where music itself you think is I would say a pretty good meritocracy. Right? If Taylor Swift writes some good music, it's going to be popular. She makes a bunch of money, good for her. But the system doesn't necessarily support, right? Engineers, people that work on tours, people that do the creative design around these things. That still has some challenges getting through those doors. It's still too male focused, or just the number of people working in it. So the system behind the artist, all that part of the music industry, and then in esports, I mentioned it before. That's another place. Gaming's another, I would say, it's another place that we've, whether you're a gamer or not, you've watched these last few years, given the pandemic and how much, we're a little bit home and maybe gaming, that people can be comfortable, right? LGBT, women, anybody who maybe doesn't feel comfortable stepping out, gaming is a place that they can be themselves or be whatever sort of, character, avatar, you see it, but there is that place that people can go and be themselves. And now, as we're coming out, I think there's more opportunity for those voices to be represented and to be heard. And I think they want to be. I think the groups that maybe you think didn't want to hear them do want to hear them. And I know gaming, you're going to see that change a lot here the next few years. You're going to really see, because it is around the world, it's probably the most diverse that I've ever seen, because, as long as you have the equipment, so I get it, economics a little bit is a challenge, but beyond that, if you like it, you want to play it, people are doing it, so now it's a matter of those voices being heard and coming out, and I think you're going to see that area as well. So for me, again, my message is there's a place, there really is a place. Maybe it's not easily identifiable at first, but keep trying. I think if you just ask, this 30% is going to get shattered for sure, and I don't just mean your board, I just know that's an effort. 30% is going to be 50% or really more at some point. So it's a great, fantastic time to even just want to try to raise your hand and be heard and be a participant. Wouldn't you say, Miss Katie, as you're out there doing it?
I would, and
banging down doors?
We changed our constitution this year. We've got 50-50, and we've got a couple of the women who are here today who are on our advisory board, which is fantastic, and you'll hear from them later. I want to bring you, Antonio, back in. What's your biggest challenge coming up with the second stage of Sirvs?
You're talking about in general terms?
In general.
Okay, first we need to set the integrity code. We are going to use the gold standards and requirements of SIGA as a benchmark in order to get excellence in this field. We are also going to work and cooperate, because I'm also FINA Vice President World Aquatics. It's very important also to have very good coordination in between LAN and FINA in this, because good governance and integrity, it's not a problem of Europe, it's a worldwide problem, so we are going to do it. And mostly for us, the most important is Europe as, when I'm talking about European aquatics, as 52 countries. what we are going to do right now is to deliver some kind of good governance survey within all the 52 national federations in order to see if the ratings and standards that they achieve allow us to give some financial head in order to improve the governance levels, constitution, bylaws, procedures, gender equity, inclusion, and so on. So we are going to perform this. And the next year budget will be based on the ratings that we achieve in each one of the countries. So this is a step-by-step process, but I think till 2024, our goal is to achieve at least the silver standards of Sirvs. This is our goal.
Fantastic. That's a great goal to have. In one sentence, Frank, what would your advice be to sports organisations in order to come on board with Sirvs?
Okay, well, I suppose you could almost say it in 2 words, which is just do it. But I wrote something down earlier on from when Denzine was speaking. He said something I think was really fundamental. He says that doing the wrong thing is more expensive than doing the right thing. And I think that's absolutely true and really fundamental to this, and that's the way to do it. And when I look at Sirvs from a BSI perspective and what we do, I might look at Denzine as my client, but actually my customer is everybody who's taking part in sports, everybody who's watching sports, everybody who's sponsoring sports, to give them the confidence that what's happening there is managed correctly, run properly, dealt with ethically, and doing the right thing. And I think that's the message for everyone, to be honest.
Thank you. Doing the right thing. Final questions to Michael. What's your call to action to other sponsors to get involved? How can we encourage more sponsors to join our efforts at SIGA and unite around the idea of putting a clause in the sponsorship contracts requiring sports properties to retain a minimum of bronze standards before the sponsorship deal takes place?
Well, it's a great question. I'm still trying to figure out, because I haven't done the job I thought I could recruiting other brands. I would say there is an element of I just don't understand. It's so important, right? We get audited all the time on so many things. I've talked to so many of my peers out there. They want to know where every ticket is, who did what, how you got there. So I would say this is just that next evolution. And for so many brands that want to be leaders, right? We're all competing, right? We have our competitive group. And we're all trying to differentiate ourselves, compete, and win. And I think this is an area to do it. I think anybody, I would just maybe have a couple simple conversations internally. Talk to your legal team, talk to your audit team. For those that don't know, in most major brands like ours, audit is actually a separate function that answers right to the board of directors. It doesn't even answer up to the CEO, technically. You're an employee of the company, but you report, and all your information goes to the board. I mean, that's kind of what this is all about, is having that independent oversight. So the desire is there. I just challenge is bring it up, do a little bit of digging, a little bit of homework, and see where would this fit in, how would this be welcomed, and my expectation would be it'd be welcomed not only with open arms, but you would be seen as a really valuable. So many of us on the marketing side are considered an expense, right? We don't generate revenue, but I would think this would be one of those welcome things that would fit in. So talk internally, find your advocates, and go from there.
Thank you to our panel for joining our integrity revolution. And in the words of Frank and maybe Nike, just do it. Brilliant. Thank you.